Hello, and welcome to a Purpose Driven Marriage podcast. We are Duane and Nadine Stewart, and we love any and all things marriage. You've tuned into the right place if you're looking for actionable, practical tips to help you overcome real life obstacles common to real relationships. We're here to help you strive for a marriage as God has designed it and not as the world has defined it. Because why settle for a good marriage when you can have a great one?
Hello, and welcome to a Purpose Driven Marriage podcast. I'm Duane.
And I am Nadine.
My lovely wife. How are you doing today, babe?
I am tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired, but I'm doing well.
Yes.
I showed up.
Yeah, we're here and we're ready to talk. And actually, today we're here to talk a little bit about, I think, a commonly known topic or phrase that people use for friendships at work. What do they call them?
Work spouse or work husband, work wife.
Yeah.
But you know, babe, it's different. It's different from friendships at work. It's different from the colleague relationship. A work wife or a work husband, what we're talking about is someone at work who you have a close relationship with.
Yeah.
Right? You share personal details with. It's probably the reason why that name, wife or husband, as a term of endearment is given to that individual. And so, again, it's different from simply coworker or colleague or just a simple friend.
Yeah. I read a couple things about it, and it was quite interesting. One article defined it as a special platonic friendship with a work colleague characterized by close emotional bond, high levels of disclosure and support, and mutual trust, honesty, loyalty, and respect.
So the only thing missing is the vows?
Right. Yeah. Do you take this man or this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife or husband?
At work?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. But here's the thing that I was trying to figure out, like, so where did this all come from? And one thing that I read earlier was that, do you remember like way back in the day when the CEO of the company had a secretary?
Yes.
Or like what we call administrative assistant now. That person was considered the office wife, because that person was the one that basically tended to all the needs of the boss, right? Got their clothes for them and got gifts for his wife for them, and basically anticipated all the needs of the president or the CEO or whatever. And they had a close relationship because she kind of had to be in his head. You know what I mean? And so that, I think that's where that office wife came from. But then at a certain point, then it just morphed into, hey, we're just going to be friends, but we're going to be really close friends. Like the first one kind of makes sense until it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Until it turns from office wife and just kind of this relationship where it's business. You do what I kind of asked you to do, and that's it. And then it turned into sometimes, having late nights and maybe a more romantic relationship after that.
Well, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the modern day version of a work wife or a work husband?
Well, I don't like it. I hate the term, to be honest with you. I mean, I got one wife and that's all I can handle. You know what I mean? Why would I want a wife at work too? No, it's just, to me, when you take number one, in most cases, it is the person of the opposite sex, right? So you think about it from that perspective. So now you have somebody that's close to you, that all the terms that we just kind of talked about, what they call a platonic relationship, and with the work colleague was close emotional bond. Like, you're not really supposed to have a close emotional bond with anybody of the opposite sex unless they are your wife or your husband. In my case, it's my wife.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you're opening yourself up to major challenges because, yes, like we said, it's person of the sex, but at the same time, you're not going to volunteer to be friends and be close to somebody that you're not attracted to.
You don't think so?
Nope.
Wow. You know what? That's actually a really, really interesting point.
Yeah, I don't think so. So, because you think about it, it's somebody that's fun to talk to, that you can kind of share some of your deepest emotions with. You're creating a bond with that person. You're sharing some of the challenges that you might have at work, and you're asking for their feedback and those types of things. And you're not going to want to continually have a conversation with that person if you don't really like them in some sort of way.
Well, that's actually a really good point, honey. I have a couple thoughts about that. First of all, just from a selfish perspective, I do not like the idea of sharing a title with anyone else in your life.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's the jealous side of it, right? I mean, for sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so, like, to me, I'm your wife. There isn't any other version of me in another location.
No.
Right? And so I am the one and only. And that's how I want to keep it.
That's right.
But the other thing is, when you start labeling people, it's actually self-fulfilling. I mean, they have studies that show that if you, like, for example, we have a bunch of children. If we label them by characteristics that we think we see in them, like, for example, oh, this is our smart one.
Yeah.
They begin to live up to that.
Yep.
Right? Students in school, you label them as smart, they begin to believe that they're smart. And so when you start labeling someone your work wife or your work husband, even if it starts off 100% platonic, right? There are no feelings, nothing like that involved, but you give them a name that is a name that's set apart from anyone else. It becomes self-fulfilling eventually.
Exactly what they've termed it, right?
Yes.
It's interesting because when you say that, there are some stats about that as well.
Oh, let's hear it.
So from an article from Simply Hired, a survey indicated that about half of women and 41% of men had reported that they had a work spouse at some point in their careers. That's number one, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of, all right, so we got a work spouse. It seems to be somewhat platonic, right? But 84% in that same study, 84% of men and 61% of women reported a romantic attraction to their work spouse.
Wow.
So it started off being just an innocent, just friendship. At some point in time, it turns into something a whole lot deeper than that. You got to think about it, though. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Our kids at school, how much time do they spend at school compared to home? Right?
Oh, they spend a lot of time at school.
Right. And so how much time do we, in the traditional sense, like now people work from home and things like that, but in a traditional sense, how much time do we spend at work as opposed to at home, right? So you spend a lot of time with these people. And so that's a lot of time to create bonds and friendships and one-on-one opportunities and those types of things. It could definitely start off in just an unassuming, innocent way. And then over time, you just start to build and build and build more emotions, more feelings, more connection. And then you turn around, you're like, oh my goodness, like I'm having feelings for this person.
Well, it's creating a lot of opportunities for boundaries to be crossed.
Yep.
And so when you start doing a lot more of those things that, you're sharing emotions, you're sharing feelings, you're sharing thoughts, you are spending time with this person, a whole lot more time than you're spending with others.
Right.
You're creating opportunities to cross boundaries.
Right. No doubt. And one of the things that it kind of talked about was, what are the benefits of having one of these work spouses? It's, somebody to confide in, somebody to talk about different frustrations, somebody to challenge you, somebody to lift you up and those types of things at work. And I'm thinking to myself, man, you know what? That's definitely not supposed to be the role of somebody else. It should be the role of your spouse, right? So in my mind, why couldn't that person also be somebody of the same sex?
Yeah. So you're saying you and a buddy at work, right? Like a male buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Why couldn't they do the same thing to you? Why do we need somebody that helps you to develop and build you up and encourage you and stuff like that? Why does that person have to be a person of the opposite sex? It could be just a friend that's of the same sex that could still fulfill those same needs that you have to help you be more successful at work.
Well, I'll tell you why. It's because we have this innate desire to have certain things fulfilled that can really only be fulfilled by someone of the opposite sex, right? By someone that cares about us, or even the perception of caring about us, in that for a man, and a woman, like in a nurturing way, for a woman to a man in a way that makes us feel heard, makes us feel validated, right? The types of things that we desire from our spouse. And, honey, looking at this from a marriage coach or relationship coach perspective, it's interesting because what these studies are suggesting, or the behaviors they're often seen in a quote unquote work wife, work husband situation, those are the types of things that often go missing in a marriage that lead them down a path where conflict begins to happen that they can't seem to overcome. Right? This is when marriages go downhill. Is when these types of things that, according to these articles, people are getting from someone of the opposite sex at work. Those are the things that mysteriously somehow go missing at home. And so my question that I have popping up in my mind is, if that need that we have, like my need for you to validate me, my need for you to listen to me, talk about my feelings or whatever it might be, if that need is being fulfilled by someone else at work, what need do I have for you at home?
Right. And so what is your spouse going to feel about that? When you come home and you've had all of your validation, you've got all your frustrations taken care of and all those different things, and that's something that your spouse is supposed to do, you don't feel the need to do it anymore at home. So what conversations are you going to have? What types of connection are you going to be able to create with your husband or with your wife outside of what you've kind of already done with the person at work that you've given all of that other stuff to, that should have gone to your mate, the one that you created vows with and those types of things.
You're basically shortchanging your spouse.
No doubt.
Right? You're not giving them the best version of yourself, which when we're looking at marriage from a biblical perspective, right? Like God is number one, but our spouse should be second.
It's
right.
Sacred.
Should be exactly.
It's a sacred relationship. It should be protected with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your strength.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the other dangers of being in the mindset that it's okay for me to have this work spouse. One of the other dangers that I think we don't think about is, we think that just because, I'm not going to do anything physical with them, right? I'm not going to cross that line. I'm not going to cross that boundaries. Well, sometimes you can't help what you begin to feel emotionally. Emotional infidelity is a much, much finer line to cross than physical infidelity. But the damage could be just as bad.
Right.
If you found out that I had an emotional connection with someone where I found myself essentially replacing the things that you fulfill for me on an emotional level.
Like, what use am I anymore?
Well, not just that, but you'd feel pretty betrayed.
Of course.
Right? Because then when you have those types of feelings for someone, you're thinking about them. You're thinking about them not just when you're not just when you're at work, but when you're at home. They're filling spaces in your mind that should only be occupied by your actual spouse.
That's right. Yeah. That's 100% true. So if we're talking about that piece of it, then we can talk about how when Jesus talks about adultery, he says, but it's been said that adultery is really just the physical aspect of cheating on your spouse. But he said, I say it is if you have any lustful thoughts in your mind about somebody else, that is adultery. And that's what ends up happening here. You're allowing the enemy, and that's really what he's saying. You're allowing the enemy to now control your mind, and you're allowing the enemy to really take a foothold, just one little foot in that door to kind of open it up so that now you're opening yourself up to things that could lead to the physical nature of it, or it's filling your mind, as you said before, of things that are not of your spouse. And that is 100% not going to lead to you making more of a connection with your husband or wife. It's leading to more of a connection with somebody that's outside of your home.
And there's also one other aspect that just actually popped into my mind right now because it reminded me of a memory. When I was working for a big company many, many years ago, there was rumor of someone that I worked with of having an affair with a coworker that was essentially like his work wife. Whether or not there ever was an affair.
Right. It didn't matter.
It didn't matter, but we'll never know. The perception of it. And it actually ended up hurting him. it ended up hurting his ability to advance with the company. He eventually ended up leaving the company because there was that perception that things were going on because of the intimacy of the relationship that he had with this other person who, in that case, actually happened to be a subordinate. And so I know that that's outside the scope of what we typically talk about with marriage and relationships, and that's more career advancement. But that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
Right? It's the perception of it. And as a Christian, I know that our audience is a mixed audience. We have a lot of Christians that are listening to us, and then we also have some that don't practice any particular faith. But as a Christian, we talk about living your life above reproach. Not giving anyone the opportunity
to stumble.
Well, not just to stumble, but not giving anyone the opportunity to assume guilt.
Yeah.
Right. And so your behavior has to be in such a way that no one can make assumptions that you are guilty of doing something that you know you're not doing.
Right.
But even in the event that did happen where people are assuming guilt, your character, your behavior will speak on your behalf.
Yeah.
And so that in itself right there, as a Christian, right, we don't want to create the wrong perceptions of us when we're supposed to be drawing people closer to Jesus.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I can tell you this, at work, I've been extremely cognizant of that. Like when we have our work meetings, I make sure that there are no opportunities for people to think, oh, okay, so what's going on with Duane and so-and-so? And because everybody sees you. Everybody's looking at everybody, you know what I mean? And I remember actually at a previous meeting that I had, I was going in the elevator and there was somebody else in the elevator as well. And she was like, hey, let's wait for so-and-so to come in with us. Because I was like, I'm just going to press the button and go up the elevator. I wasn't even thinking about anything. I was actually thinking about calling you afterwards. And it got me thinking. I was like, oh, my goodness. Yeah, you're right. Like, we're the only two people in here. You know what I mean? And what would that look like? And so we let somebody else in and we go up the elevator. That's totally innocent, right? But it's also about the perception of it.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny, babe, is there are going to be people listening to this who will think that example was ridiculous. Yeah, they're going to hear that and say, are you kidding me? So now I can't even go up an elevator with someone of the opposite sex. That's not necessarily what we're saying.
That's not.
No, all we're doing is we're saying, you know what? People are watching, right? Especially if you profess to be a Christian, right? And you know that your purpose in life is to draw people closer to Jesus. You don't want to create opportunities for people to question your integrity, question your character, and stumble on their way to getting to know Jesus, right? Like you don't want to be the one that keeps them from desiring a relationship with him.
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah, I knew they were fake, right? I mean, they claim to be a Christian, but the way they're acting is definitely not Christ-like. That's not something that I want in my life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a question. So let's say someone is listening to this, right? And they realize, oh my gosh, I think that they're talking about possibly my situation. And I would never want to do that. I would never want to do anything at work that would cause problems at home or even the perception that I might be doing something wrong. So let's say someone finds themselves at work already in a situation where they have a work wife or they have a work husband. What do?
Yeah. So you find yourself in that situation and you see that, okay, well, this is a challenge. What do I do about it now? And say you're also in a situation where you work very closely with this person. Like you're on projects with them. You're kind of forced to be in a group setting or even in a one-on-one setting with this person because of the fact that you work together, you work on different projects. And
that's a very real possibility, right? Like that happens all the time.
Yeah, and you just can't help it. So I feel like, I mean, in those situations, you have to now change your mindset to this is a work situation and that's it. Right? You have to make work and then personal, I think, in this instance. So your conversations are now work related. It's like, okay, this is the project, this is what we got to do, and blah, blah, blah. You might have side conversations here and there about different things, but you don't really allow the conversation to go into a purely personal direction or anything that would cause you guys to be in that place where you're now connecting a lot more and those types of things. But you have to remove the label, right? The label has to be removed, that this is a close friend or this is my work spouse or whatever it is. That has to be removed, and now it has to be more of, okay,
this is my colleague.
This is my colleague, yeah. Because we talked about this before. It's like, okay, is having a friend of the opposite sex, is that appropriate? And that would probably be another topic. But once you start to kind of open those things up, it just becomes real messy.
Absolutely. And this is also when I would bring you.
Oh, for sure.
I would bring you into the picture, right? If I haven't already.
I think that's totally appropriate. You have to.
Exactly. If I hadn't already, this is when I am talking about you a whole lot more. This is when maybe I am having you meet us for lunch, or we're having to do dinners together, for example, because that was a really big thing in our previous industry, right? Going out to dinner. Maybe this is an opportunity to bring you along, right? And so this is when, if you had not already, this is when you're entering the picture.
Right.
So everyone knows who my actual husband is.
Yeah. And this is not, because I've read articles, okay? Some of the articles are like, well, if your spouse is not okay with your work husband, then you bring him into the picture so that they meet each other. So it's like, okay, no, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, all right, well, I want you to understand, person at work, that this is my number one. This is my ace, my ace boom coon, my day one, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's nothing that gets in the way of this. So I want you to know, here's the hierarchy. My wife is number one. You are not, I don't think of you in that way. You are my work colleague, and that's it. What I try to do in my work situations, work conversations, is insert you in pretty much everything, right? And not when we're talking about work, you know what I mean? But whenever we're having a conversation, then I'm always talking about my wife. Everybody knows who my wife is, and I think that's an important piece, because they're like, oh, okay, you talking about your wife. That's good, because they know where your heart is. They know your heart is at home with your spouse and your kids, and that your relationship with them is extremely important, paramount over everything else. I love that.
Yeah. And you know what I'm curious about? I would be curious to know what our listeners think, because this is our opinion, right? And even the research that we saw is divided.
Yep.
There are some that say there's a benefit, a career advancement benefit to having a work wife or a work husband, because there's opportunities to advance together, because there's someone at work that's
kind of boosting you.
Boosting you, exactly. But then there's the other side of the research that says, oh, no, like you don't want to do that, because it could potentially hurt your own marriage, your own relationship in a number of different ways that I think we've already talked about.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know what our listeners think.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is our opinion.
Yes.
And so for our listeners, we'd love to know what you think.
Yeah.
Send us a message either on Instagram. A Purpose Driven Marriage is our Instagram account handle.
Right.
Or email us at Nadine at apurposedrivenmarriage.com.
Yeah.
And let us know.
Yeah.
Because we would love to know what the reality is out there. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Personally, I've never had an experience where there's anyone that could claim to have been my work husband. I've never labeled anyone a work husband. And so I can't speak to this from experience, but I can speak to it from the perspective of someone who works with a lot of couples
where
who
you've seen that as an issue.
Yes, they're struggling in their marriage because what is missing in their relationship today is now present in their relationship with someone else. And so I can speak to that. Yeah. And I think Duane can say the same thing.
Yeah. So basically the moral of this is, if you find yourself in that situation, I would be thinking about my wife, and why am I giving someone that's not my wife a part of me that I should be giving to somebody else, given to her?
Exactly. And the bottom line is, if you're seeking a purpose-driven marriage, right, the focus needs to be your spouse.
Right.
God in the center, but It's about your relationship with your spouse, not your relationship with anyone else.
Yeah.
Feel free to have friends. Feel free to have acquaintances. Feel free to have coworkers.
Yeah.
But the title of wife and the title of husband belongs to the person that you marry.
Yeah. No doubt.
And so, well, we hope that this has helped you get well on your way to having that purpose-driven marriage. And please let us know. Let us know what your thoughts are on this. I am really genuinely curious to find out what you guys think, what your experience has been, what you've seen other people's experience to have been. And so thank you for today. And we will see you all back here again
next week.